Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Liam Douglas here, coming at you from West Elmira, New York. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about why Fujifilm cameras are the best cameras on the market. But before we begin, make sure you check out the Liam Photography Podcast. You can find it anywhere that podcasts are available. All right, so let's get into what makes Fujifilm the best cameras on the market. And before I get a bunch of hate mail and spam hate in the comments and all of that good stuff, let me just preface this by saying that in my opinion, I think Fujifilm makes the best cameras on the market. And the reason why I do is Fujifilm is very unique with their camera designs. Most of their cameras actually look like the old school analog film cameras. So it makes the experience better, at least in my opinion. Now, I've shot with Canon, I've shot with Nikon, I've shot with Sony, and now I shoot with Fujifilm. And out of all the camera systems, and I'm not knocking any of the others, I just think the Fujifilm cameras are the most fun to shoot with. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. I've got an X Pro 3 here, and we'll go over some of the features and controls on the camera that make it such a joy to shoot with. Okay, so looking at my new X Pro 3 here, you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to classic styling. So on the X Pro 3, I currently have the 23mm f2 lens, which is 35mm full frame equivalent. And one of the things that makes Fuji cameras so awesome is the fact that the majority of their lenses have aperture rings. So you can actually physically adjust the aperture on the barrel of the lens itself. And that can make the experience a lot more fun and seem a lot more analog. Then over here, we have the shutter button, of course, and then we have the exposure compensation dial. We have the shutter speed dial, which also offers your ISO control, so it's a dual purpose dial. You lift it up to adjust the aperture, and then you press the pin in the center to adjust your shutter speed like so. So it's pretty cool, and it's very retro as far as the design itself. Now, one of the things I love about the X Pro 3 is if you look on the back here, it actually has a little screen. I don't know how well you can see it here. Let me turn the camera on real quick. And it will actually show you your current film simulation that you're using in this little back window, which makes it seem like you're back in the analog days of shooting film, where you could see the type of film you had in the camera through the window on the back of the camera itself. So it's really cool, and it makes it seem really retro. That's another one of the things I really love about Fujifilm cameras. Now, on this particular camera, it does not have a tilting touch screen. It just has a fold down screen like so. And if I take the lens cap off here, you can see here, I'm just using it here on the desk, so it's seeing my chargers for my laptop and stuff in the background there. But you can see what I'm talking about. Now, this fold down only style screen is nice because when you're doing street photography, you can shoot from the hip, so it makes your photography a lot more discreet, and people don't tend to notice what you're doing quite as much. Now, with this particular camera, and not all Fujifilm cameras have it, this camera actually has both an OVF, optical viewfinder, and an EVF, or electronic viewfinder. This camera offers both, just like the X100 line does. Now, on the front here, we have a physical switch, and that switch is how you switch between the OVF and the EVF. So it's kind of cool, it's kind of handy. And then of course over here we got our shutter, or I mean not shutter, but we have our autofocus controls, where we can set the camera for manual focus, we can set it for continuous focus, or we can set it for single autofocus, which is what I use the majority of the time. I don't very often use continuous autofocus unless I'm shooting motorsports, which I have done a lot of over the years. So it does come in handy to have that selector switch. The only one of my Fuji bodies that doesn't have that selector switch is the XE4. Now, all of the previous XE line had that switch, and I'm not sure why Fuji decided to remove it from the XE4, but they did. And that was a little bit of a disappointment because, as I said, I really love having that selector switch for my autofocus mode. And then, of course, on the back here, we also have our drive button. which also doubles as your delete button. And then your AEL and AFL, I actually have reprogrammed to be back button focus. I don't like having my focus on the half press of the shutter. I prefer to use back button focus, and a lot of photographers do, just because it's more convenient, and for me it's just quicker and a little more accurate. And then of course you have your rear command dial. You've got your little joystick there. You have your menu button and OK, you have the playback, and then you have the display and back button. And then of course over here by my camera strap you can see the button for the Q menu. So there are a lot of controls and functions on the Fujifilm cameras, and most all of them can be customized. Now on the front here, this little button next to the shutter button is generally used for controlling your ISO. So you can press that and then adjust your ISO. You have the front command dial as well. So you have a lot of functions and features that are built into pretty much all of the Fujifilm cameras. And that's one of the reasons why I personally feel that Fujifilm cameras are the best on the market, because they remind me of the analog filming days when I first started out doing photography in the 80s. So their cameras, even though they're digital, they do very successfully emulate a lot of the analog styling and the analog photographic process. And again, that's something I really love about Fujifilm. Now, getting back to what I was talking about a moment ago with the film simulations, if I go into the camera here, let me go into the menu system and let me go down to film simulations. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this, but you can see I have mine set to classic chrome. If I scroll all the way up to the top, you have standard, then you have Velvia, which is their vivid film simulation. You have Astia, which is a little softer, classic chrome, which is one of my favorites. And then you have Pro Neg High, you have Pro Neg Standard, you have Classic Neg, then you have Eterna, which is their cinema film simulation. And then you have Acris plus G filter. You have Monochrome plus G filter. And then you have Sepia, which is the old school, kind of like old school, what do I want to call it? It'll make your images look like they were taken basically in like the 1800s. It adds kind of a coolish looking rust color to the photographs themselves, is the best way I can explain it. But again, these film simulations are a lot of what make Fuji cameras so much fun to shoot, aside from all of the physical aesthetics that you can see here, with the cameras being very retro in design, with lots of dials, lots of controls that you can customize and make the camera a lot of fun to shoot with. That is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, Fujifilm cameras are some of the best on the market, if not the best, in my opinion. Again, it's my opinion, because they're actually a joy to shoot with. If you really love picking up your camera, then you're going to pick up your camera more frequently. You're going to take it with you when you just go into town to get groceries or something like that. And if you spot something cool, you're going to pull over, jump out of your car, and snap a photo. That is one of the things that I really love about my Fujifilm cameras. So wrapping up, as you can see, there is absolutely a lot to love about Fujifilm cameras. Now, Fuji, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the video, but Fuji for many years only made APS-C cameras. About 5 or 6 years ago, they started doing medium format mirrorless as well. So they do have two lines of cameras. You know, Canon, Sony, and Nikon, they both offer APS-C plus full frame, but they concentrate mostly on their full frame. As they develop new technology, they put it in their full frame bodies first, and then eventually some of that tech trickles down to their APS-C bodies. Fuji, on the other hand, is primarily an APS-C camera maker. So they put all of their latest technology and capabilities and functions into their APS-C bodies, which is one of the reasons why Fujifilm is known as the king of APS-C. They've been doing it for a very long time. I can't really say they've been doing it longer than the other camera manufacturers, but because their APS-C bodies are their primary line of cameras, all of their latest and greatest technology, capabilities, functions, and features go into those bodies, which makes them better than the competition's APS-C bodies, because as I said, the other three manufacturers are concentrating more on putting the latest and greatest tech in all of their full-frame bodies. Now, when it comes to the film simulations that I mentioned a little bit ago, one of the really cool things about Fujifilm's film simulations is they were all designed by the same gentleman that created a lot of Fuji's color film from the analog days. All of their films from the analog days, whether it was Acros, Velvia, Astia, Classic Chrome. Now, Classic Chrome wasn't a film that Fuji made back in their film days, and they still make film today. I believe, honestly, even though Fuji doesn't admit it, that it's actually a replication of Kodachrome 64, which was an extremely popular analog film back in the film photography days. It was one of the films that I liked to shoot with back when I shot film. I liked Kodachrome 64, I liked Velvia and Astia, and Acros were my favorites. Now it's Classic Chrome that I use 90% of the time on my Fuji bodies. I use the Classic Chrome just because I love the way the colors are rendered. They look like photographs that you would have taken in the 70s or 80s, that kind of color. So I really like that. That's my personal taste. If you're shooting Fujifilm, you might use a different film simulation. To each their own. But the cool thing is, because of their really good film simulations, a lot of Fujifilm photographers shoot JPEGs straight out of camera. And that can save you a lot of time and hassle, because then you don't have to go through the process of post-processing raw files. So you take up less memory card space, less hard drive space, and you can totally skip the post-processing software portion of your workflow. All right, that's going to wrap up this video. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch it. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, like it, share it out on social media, hit the little bell icon so you can be notified when the next video comes out, and I will see you in the next one.